Shabbat Shalom. I'm Cantor David Proser of Kempsville Conservative Synagogue, Kehillat Ben HaMidrash in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And this is Torah commentary for this Shabbat, June 13th, 2020. We thank Rabbi Joyce Newmark, Rabbi Joseph Prauser, Rabbi Adam Rosenbaum, Rabbi Michael Gold, and the United Synagogue Torah Sparks series for their various teachings and publications on this week's Parsha. This Shabbat, June 13th, we read the Parsha of Beha Alotecha in the book of Bamidbar. The Parsha begins on page 816 of the Eitz Chaim Chumash and page 606 of the Hertz. The Parsha opens with God's instructions regarding the menorah, which illuminated the interior of the Mishkan. Next is the ritual for purification of the Levites who begin their divine service. The term of service for the Levites is given as between the ages of 25 and 50. At the beginning of the second year following the Exodus, God tells Moshe that the Israelites are to offer the Passover sacrifice on the 14th day of the month at twilight, the anniversary of the Exodus from Egypt. A number of Israelites, prevented from participation in the Paschal offering due to ritual impurity on the prescribed date, protest their inability to bring the sacrifice. Moshe relays their protest to God, who provides an innovation in Passover law. Those who were impure or away from the community at the time appointed for the offering are to observe a compensatory Pesach Sheni, a second Passover, a month later. The people finally resume their journey through the wilderness. The manifestation of God's presence among the Israelites, a cloud over the Mishkan by day and a pillar of fire by night, is not only a sign of God's divine protection, but is also the sign which indicates to the Israelites the timing of their movements and encampments along their journey. God instructs Moshe to have 2 silver trumpets made. These would be used to summon the Israelites to assemble and to march. In the future, once the Israelites are settled in their land, these trumpets would also call them together for festivals and to war. The precise order of the march traversing the wilderness is provided in detail, and in the second year, on the 20th of the second month, the Israelites march forth. Moshe invites his father-in-law to accompany the Israelite camp, but the invitation is declined. Chapter 10 concludes with a familiar 2-verse Song of the Ark. These verses, Vayehi bin Soah ha'aron and Uvenucha Yomar, are recited at the removal from and the return of the Torah to the Ark during the Torah service. The couplet is set apart from its context in the Torah scroll by 2 inverted Hebrew letters Nun, which serve as brackets. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi taught that these couplets are to be considered a separate biblical book. The recurring pattern of complaints by a disgruntled Israelite population returns at Tavera, then at Kivrot Hatava, and subsequently by a disheartened and frustrated Moshe himself. God provides the Israelites with manna and later with quail. God responds to Moshe's burden of leadership by instructing that he appoint 70 elders who will be granted a portion of Moshe's spirit. Moshe's openness to the spiritual gifts and leadership of others is confirmed in his confident response toward Eldad and Medad, who prophesy in the Israelite camp. Would that all God's people were prophets, that the Lord put his Spirit upon them. Moshe at his very best. The last story in the Parsha involves Moshe being harshly criticized by Miriam and Aharon, his sister and brother, about his marriage to a Cushite woman. Commentaries abound as to whether the term referred to his marrying a Nubian or Ethiopian woman, or whether the term refers to a Cushan woman, meaning a Midianite, which would refer to Zipporah. Rashi even posits that Miriam was criticizing him not for marrying Zipporah, but for neglecting her, because he was always available at any hour, day or night, should God summon him, or for any of the multitude of matters of the people. In any event, Miriam is punished by God with tsarat, a scaly skin disease, because she spoke her concerns to others about Moshe instead of going directly to Moshe himself. Aharon is humbled as he has to appeal to his brother to intercede with God on behalf of their sister. Moshe responds with a brief prayer. Elna refana la. O God, pray, heal her, which affects her eventual recovery. The Israelite camp, from which the impure Miriam has been temporarily excluded for 7 days, waits for her return before resuming their journey. The Haftorah for this Shabbat is from the book of Zechariah, chapter 2, verse 14 to chapter 4, verse 7, beginning on page 837 of the Eitz Chaim Chumash and page 620 of the Hertz. Both the Parsha and the Haftorah give special attention to the ceremonial menorah and its lamps. In the Torah, the context is God's instruction about kindling the lights in the Mishkan, the temporary tabernacle in the wilderness. In the Haftorah, Zechariah's prophecy includes imagery of a vision of the future temple and its leaders. The Haftorah begins with God's promise of a return to Zion after the Babylonian exile. It continues with the purification and investiture of the high priest and a declaration of God's forgiveness for the people's sins in the land. Priestly concerns and details dominate the Haftorah. It ends with the prophet's vision of menorah in the Jerusalem temple. Shabbat Shalom, good Shabbos, and as always, we look forward to the day when we can do this in person, in our own sanctuaries, in Temple Israel, and in Kempsville Conservative in Virginia Beach. Shabbat Shalom.